Hi everyone, today I'm going to be drawing this single tulip in colored pencils. I am using Prismacolor and Polychromos pencils on Strathmore Bristol Smooth 300 series paper for this project. And you can see me here just getting started by blocking in the yellow portions of the tulip with my yellow pencils. I used 3 pencils for this. I used the Polychromos light cadmium, Polychromos regular cadmium, and the Prismacolor canary yellow. Now I'm starting to work in some of the interior colors, getting some of those dark reds in there. That is a Polychromos dark red. It's an aptly named pencil. I like to use both brands of pencils, or I use several brands in some of my larger pieces, but I always like to have a combination of a really sharp pencil that will hold its point, like the Polychromos, so an oil-based pencil with a really hard lead, and then a softer pencil with a waxier base like Prismacolor or Luminance. Those pencils just work really nicely in combination, and you can combine the characteristics to create whatever kinds of effects that you're going for in your drawings. And this is just a layering process. You'll see me work back and forth between all these different areas with my different colors. I do like to make sure I get some curved lines in there, the veins of the petals, and follow the curve of that petal just to make sure I accentuate the shape of the petals, trying to create more of a 3D effect. I like to block those in first, and then I can come over with more pencils, and typically they'll still show up toward the end, and I can accentuate them even more or darken them up even more if I decide to. You'll also see me using the Polychromos Permanent Carmine and Mater pencils, and I use the Prismacolor Tuscan Red and Mahogany Red, and even a little bit, I think, of the Crimson Lake in here. You don't need too many pencils. You just want to make sure you have some different values. You want some really dark reds and some brighter reds. Here I'm just blending all of this out with the Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, just dissolving the pencil pigment. That creates a really nice base for me to go back over with more layers of colored pencil and create that really nice painterly look that I'm going for. And here you can see me doing that now, using an electric eraser if I want to brighten up an area a little bit. Probably not going to be able to erase this back to white, like if I make a big mistake. That is not going to work very well with colored pencils, but I can use that electric eraser to brighten up some areas and create some texture on my drawings, which I do very often. Trying to create some of those little wispy lines of the red as it works its way up into the edges there where the yellow is. Using a really sharp pencil to do that. And a little bit of green just around the bottom where the tulip is going to start to attach to the stem. I use my Prismacolor bronze pencil in that area. It's one of my favorite go-to pencils for anything that's it seems to just work in a lot of instances like that where I don't want a really dark green, but nothing else seems to really fit. So now you can see me moving on to the leaves of this drawing, and the leaves were almost as much of a focal point here as the flower itself. These are glorious tulip leaves, one of my favorite kinds of leaves to draw. And the very first thing I'm doing is I'm blocking in all of my shadow areas using the Prismacolor black pencil and the Prismacolor 90% cool gray. And that's just because I don't have a green that's dark enough to give me those values. So I just go ahead and get them blocked in with the gray, and then I can go over with my green pencils and I'll just have a really dark value of gray there. And it's just a really easy way for me to work. You can see my reference image is over on the left, pulled up on my iPad. And that's something that I often do. I like to have my reference images on my iPad so that I can zoom in where I need to. And this is actually a reference image that I took myself from some tulips that I just bought from the grocery store. And you can see a video that I posted on YouTube that shows exactly how I take and edit my reference images for my drawings. It's just a quick little 1-minute tip video, but I had a lot of fun creating several different references from those tulips. This is the first one I've drawn. Hopefully I will draw some more in the future. Still learning to take my own reference images and create my own compositions, so that's an ongoing process. But I like to work in a photorealistic way, so the better the reference image I have, the better my drawing is going to be. So I work really hard to make sure I have some great references. And still working back and forth with that black pencil and the dark gray, just to put the finishing touches on these shadowed areas, darkening up some places. And now coming in with my Prismacolor, that's the pale sage, and just working on that brightest area. Sometimes I have more highlighted areas that I need to work through, but in this case had some really dark shadows but not a lot of really bright highlights, so I'm able to start coming through pretty quickly here with just my mid-tone colors. There's a Polychromos permanent green olive. And now this is the Prismacolor Kelly Green, and one of the things I did with this drawing is after I finished drawing in all of those shadows, I came over every part of these leaves with this Prismacolor Kelly Green, and you can see how my shadows are still standing out underneath that color. And then I'm going to come over and layer a few other greens on top before I blend this all out with gamsol. And when I reference gamsol, any solvent or odorless mineral spirits will work. That's just gamsol's the particular brand of solvent that I use. But it's not available everywhere, so any solvent should provide a very similar result. Just wanting to dissolve that pencil pigment, get rid of any of the graininess and make it look more like paint. So this was a fairly good size drawing, you can see in relation to my hand, so this did take a little time, but certainly wasn't hard. Once you have all of those shadows blocked in, then this is pretty much just coloring in like a kid, which is nice to be able to relax a little bit. But now you can really see that leaf kind of coming together. And then I brought in a few other colors from Polychromos. I was using the juniper green, which is just a really nice bright neutral green. I was also using chrome oxide green, which is a little darker value, and then that permanent green olive was really giving me some brightness. where I needed it. So I just layered those over until I was happy with this overall. And now starting to blend everything out with the Gamsol odorless mineral spirits. You can see me getting my head in the way of the camera. It's a little bit embarrassing, something I try to avoid, but there you go. And I'm just going to go over every part of this. I dip the brush into the gamsol and then dab it off on that old cloth you can see that I have there next to me. And I work with a pretty dry brush for the most part. I don't have a lot of gamsol on that brush. That is a Royal & Langnickel No. 2 Filbert. Just a watercolor brush. That's an inexpensive brush. I also use a Winsor & Newton No. 2 Round Miniature, which is I think the brush that I use to blend the actual tulip itself. There's that Winsor & Newton. It's a lot smaller so I can get finer detail. And now I am coming over with my next layers of pencil. And basically, I'm just going to work leaf by leaf at this point. So I'm darkening up the shadows where they need to be darkened. And then I'm just going to go over everything with another layer of those greens. And I basically just keep working back and forth until I'm happy. You can see lots of layers. Here I'm just correcting the size and shape of the stem. Wanted it to be a little thinner, so I just sharpened up the edge there around it. And then coming back over with some of that pale sage. And now moving on to the next section of leaves. Again, darkening up the shadow and smoothing everything out. Started off with the black Prismacolor again. And doing some work here on this area. You can just see how it's kind of rough looking when I'm zoomed in here close after blending everything out with the gamsol. So I just need those second layers to smooth everything out and give it that nice painterly look that I'm going for. So I'm just going to layer over and over this. In this particular leaf, I was also really trying to accentuate the fact that there was a bump there or a bend. So I had to highlight around the edge of that and then darken up the other side. And I also used my darker green pencils to create some veiny lines there to accentuate that shape. And then down into my final leaf. Again, just that same process over and over. These second layers are a lot easier than the first layers. I don't have to do quite as much thinking. Everything's already should be where it's supposed to be. Occasionally I'll have to do some course correction, but for the most part it's just making everything really look nice and smooth. Using that pale sage to brighten up some areas. And here you can see my completed drawing, and I'm going to go ahead and sign that. I usually use a micron pen, but I did decide to go ahead and use this gold Posca paint pen. If you would like to learn how I drew this or learn to draw it yourself, you can head over to Patreon, where I have a 4-part tutorial series, and I'll show you how I drew this from start to finish. It also includes the reference image, supplies list, and a line drawing. So check that out if you are interested. Otherwise, I will see you here on YouTube next week with another video. Bye, everybody.